Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, but it's not. We're talking about building the future of our digital world, not here on Earth, but up in orbit.
All right, so let's get right into it. You might be thinking, why on Earth would we do this? Are we running out of space down here? Not really. The reason all the big tech players are looking up to the stars, it's not about saving land. It's about saving something way more precious: time.
So, this whole story really starts right here, on the ground, with a problem we can all kind of feel. Our demand for AI, for data, for just more computing power, it's exploding. And it's growing so fast that our planet's infrastructure just can't keep up.
And here's the real bottleneck. It's not the tech itself, it's speed. I mean, look at this. On Earth, if you want to build a big new data center, you need a new power plant to go with it. And just getting the permits for that can take 5, even 10 years. But in space, you could launch that exact same amount of compute power on about 50 Starship flights. Years versus months. It's a totally different ballgame.
So at the end of the day, the AI revolution is hitting a wall. And it's not a technology wall, not a lack of silicon or software. It's a wall of red tape, of bureaucracy. We literally cannot get power grids approved and built here on the ground fast enough to feed the beast.
Okay, so if building on Earth is just too slow, what's the alternative? Well, you go where you can build fast. You go to orbit. And the key idea here, this is really important, isn't to move all our stored data up there. It's about moving the processing, the heavy-duty thinking, into space.
And to really get this, we have to talk about something called an inference node. Now, don't think of this like a big floating hard drive. It's not for storage. A better way to think about it is like a floating brain. It's basically a satellite that's just packed to the gills with powerful GPUs, those graphics processing units, and it's designed to do one thing and one thing only: crunch through those massive AI calculations at unbelievable speed.
So how does this work in practice? It's actually pretty simple. You're on your phone, you ask an AI a question. But instead of that request zipping off to a server farm in, Virginia, it gets beamed straight up to one of these inference nodes in orbit. The super powerful chips up there do all the heavy lifting, all the thinking, and then beam the answer right back down to you. All in a fraction of a second.
Okay, but right about now, there's probably a huge, glaring question popping into your head. A very hot question, you might say. And trust me, it's the very first thing every engineer and skeptic brings up when they hear this idea. Yep, you guessed it. How do you handle all the heat? I mean, all those computer chips running full tilt generate a massive amount of heat. Down here, we use giant fans, liquid cooling, but in the vacuum of space, there's no air. So how do you stop these flying supercomputers from just melting?
And this quote from Philip, the CEO of StarCloud, one of the companies pioneering this, it just says it all. He said, "The entire company is the thermal system." Think about that. Cooling isn't just one part of their satellite design. Solving the heat problem is the whole company. Everything is built around that one challenge.
And this really shows you the engineering leap that was needed. They couldn't just take an off-the-shelf solution, like the big, heavy, incredibly expensive radiators they use on the International Space Station. That wouldn't work. They had to invent something completely new. A huge, but also super lightweight and low-cost radiator that could actually unfold in space.
And the results are just staggering. Look at this chart. Their new design is 100 times cheaper for every watt of heat it gets rid of compared to the ISS system. 100 times. That's not just an improvement, that's a breakthrough. That single innovation is what flips the switch and makes this whole wild idea economically possible.
So, okay, let's talk about the actual companies turning this from theory into reality. The story of StarCloud is just perfect because it's this classic tale of a radical idea that pretty much everyone laughed at, and now it's a validated vision that the biggest players in the game are chasing.
I mean, when they first put their white paper out there, the reaction was just brutal. They got so much hate online. You had all these critics, even so-called experts, just saying, "No way, you can't do this. You obviously haven't thought about the thermals," the very problem they built their company to solve.
But you know what they did? They just ignored the noise and kept building. Just 18 months after that ridiculed white paper, boom, they launched their first satellite on a SpaceX rocket. A few weeks later, they trained the first ever AI model in orbit. And then a week after that, they're running a version of Google's Gemini model in space. They just went down the list, systematically proving every single critic wrong.
And then came the ultimate validation. After StarCloud proved it could be done, Elon Musk himself confirmed that, yep,
SpaceX was working on the exact same idea. And just like that, overnight, the crazy idea that got so much hate was suddenly the next big thing. Everyone was on board.
So the concept is proven. It works. What's next? What's the roadmap? Well, it's basically a two-stage plan. It starts with the near-term practical stuff, and then it gets really visionary.
All right, so for the next decade, the plan is all about low Earth orbit, or LEO. The idea is to take the basic Starlink satellite design and modify it. You rip out the communication antennas, and you pack it with processors, extra solar panels, and of course those new advanced radiators. Then you launch thousands of them, using Starship, into this really clever dawn-dusk orbit, where they're almost always in sunlight, giving them constant power.
But the long-term vision, this is where it gets really wild. The moon plan. The idea is to actually build factories on the moon to make the chips and the solar panels. And then, get this, use a mass driver, basically a giant electromagnetic railgun, to just shoot the finished satellites into Earth's orbit. Why? Because the moon has such low gravity, it takes 20 times less energy to launch something from the moon to LEO than it does to launch it from Earth. It completely changes the game.
So, when you step back and look at this whole thing, what's the big takeaway? What's the real revolution we're talking about here? And you know what's funny? It's not really a story about AI. It's actually a story about something much, much bigger. Because you have to realize none of this, not the LEO plan, not the moon plan, none of it is possible without one single breakthrough technology. The entire business case, this whole future we're talking about, it all hinges on one thing: cheap, reliable access to space. It all comes down to a fully reusable rocket like Starship. Starship promises to drop the cost of launching stuff to orbit by a factor of 100, maybe even 1,000 times cheaper. A breakthrough that big doesn't just make old space stuff cheaper, it makes completely new industries. Industries like data centers in space possible for the very first time.
And that brings us to a truly mind-blowing prediction from the people who are building this stuff. They believe that within 5 to 10 years, if you're going to build a brand new, large-scale data center, it will actually be cheaper to build it in orbit than to build it anywhere on Earth. Just think about that.
And that really leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. If it's cheaper, and it's faster, and it's more scalable to build our digital future in orbit, then we have to ask ourselves a really fundamental question. Is Earth even the right place to build the infrastructure for humanity's intelligence anymore?